I was standing in the grand hall when Evelyn told the world I did not belong. The chandeliers burned bright and the music never stopped, but those words landed in my chest like a hand closing. She said it softly at first, in that soft voice that cut to the bone. "You'll never belong in this mansion or in this family." Her whisper became a wave that the whole room heard. People around me laughed or pretended not to hear, and Adam stood beside her and smiled as if nothing had happened. I forced a smile too, held my breath, and kept my hand steady on the champagne glass so my fingers would not betray me. I had planned the dress, the flowers, the small jokes I would make to sound at ease. None of that mattered now. The room spun like a slow carousel. My mother had died years before. She could not see the way Evelyn looked at me like I was a mark, or a guest she had tolerated only for her son. I remembered mornings when Adam and I had shared coffee in a small kitchen, plans spilling like sugar on the table, and how long ago those mornings felt. I kept my mouth shut because Adam was smiling and because a scene would only give them more fuel. So I stood there with the laughter humming across the marble floor and a brand new hurt warming in my ribs. I wanted to speak, to tell Evelyn she was wrong, to tell Adam that when she called me poor or cheap she was only exposing herself. But I didn't. I let that moment sit in the room like a bad smell, heavy and impossible to ignore. Later that night when I lay awake, the sentence looped over and over in my head. They had decided who I was in one breath. I decided I would not let their decision become my life. If they thought I did not belong, I would prove them wrong in the only way they understood. Hit subscribe for more true revenge stories. The next morning the lockout felt like winter. I tried my keycard at the back door that Adam had said was just for family, and the reader flashed red. I tried again because maybe it was a mistake. Then Evelyn appeared in the doorway with that same patient smile, as if she owned the sun. "Family only," she said, as if the sentence were a polite instruction. Adam watched with folded arms and said nothing. The house that had been loud with laughter yesterday was suddenly just a house of rules. My suitcase sat by the doorstep like evidence. I could have thrown my things and walked back in, demanded answers, or thrown the card at Adam's feet. Instead, I zipped the suitcase shut and left. I walked down the long drive and smelled the pines and the wet grass and felt the new reality of being outside of that world. People in town stared as I passed the cafe window where Adam once pushed me into chairs with crumbs on his lips. I took the bus back to the small apartment I had rented while we were saving for the house. It was a tiny place with a window that looked over the alley and a shower that made a funny noise. I sat on the bed and pressed my palms to my eyes until the room became a blank page. I kept the card of a lawyer I had once consulted when I thought the worst of life was a building with a leaky roof. Now the worst was larger and had a name and a voice that sounded like a coin. I promised myself a small, private vow in that quiet room. I would make them regret underestimating me. I would not scream. I would not beg. I would plan. I would work. I would use every careful step I had once learned in my old design life. The lockout had closed a door, but it opened something else in me, a steady, underground flame. I sat in my small kitchen with old papers spread everywhere, like a map of a life I had half forgotten. I had been Maya Laurent once, with a business card and a stack of client folders and a name people trusted. When Adam's company had needed space and his mother had offered help, I had folded my plans into promises and let our future rearrange itself around their wealth. I had chosen love, or that is what I told myself. I had given up deadlines, late nights at the studio, the hard, beautiful work of building a firm. I had believed that the mansion would be a place where I would belong by doing what they told me. I pulled out an old contract, stained with coffee and edges soft with years. The letterhead read Laurent Studio, and the ink smelled of deadlines. I had sketches of a terrace I had nearly built for a small gallery in the arts district, ideas that friends liked and clients had paid for. I had photos of a tiny storefront I'd almost opened before everything turned into parties and polite drinks in Evelyn's parlor. The truth sat heavy and bright. I had a past they had not seen. I realized then what I had given up and where I could return. The firm had not died. It had been left like a tool in a shed, waiting for rain to polish it. I called an old colleague, surprised at my own voice, which sounded like someone waking from sleep. He picked up right away. "Maya," he said like a question in a reunion. I told him, briefly, of the night at the Whitmore party. He listened, soft as a mat, then said, "You were one of our best. You should come back." Simple as a light switch clicking on. I set the old contract on top of the sketches and made a plan that began with a single step: reopen the firm under my maiden name. It felt like taking a deep breath of new air and deciding not to apologize for the years that had almost been mine. A week later, I sat with coffee and a bank leaflet on my knee. I had been talking to people at the bank, just small talk at first. The world of money had always felt like another language to me, one I knew in little phrases. A bank manager, a neat woman with a pin of the city crest, pulled me aside when I mentioned I had once done design for local institutions. Her voice dropped like a secret. "Between you and me, the Whitmore loan is shaky," she said. She shifted her bag and looked at the window like guilty people do when they tell a truth that makes them nervous. "The renewal is up soon. If they fail that term, the bank will have to do something." I sat very still and felt the space in my chest widen, not with triumph, but with a strange clarity. This was the hidden debt they never spoke about at dinners. It explained the late-night calls, Evelyn's tight smiles, and the way Adam had flinched when the subject was money. It also opened a door I had not thought was there. The bank manager, perhaps sensing my steady face, added, "Lots of families like that keep things quiet." I left with her words in my pocket like a scrap of paper that said, "Possible." Back in the apartment, I went through old bills and found a few documents that proved I still had a bank relationship. I called Liam, my old mentor, who had once given me a small seed investment. He answered on the third ring, and after I told him the story, he paused like someone holding a match. "Do you have the stomach for it?" he asked. I had, without meaning to, worked out how it might go. If the mortgage was at risk, if the bank had to act, then someone could buy the note. If someone controlled the note, they could control the house. I felt no pleasure in seeing a family on the brink. I felt only the precise thought that a wrong could be set right, or perhaps simply balanced. I found Sophie in the ballroom one night, her apron folded like armor and her face soft with years. She had worked in that mansion since she was a teenager, learning the secret routes of corridors, the hidden sockets under stairs, the faces people made when they thought no one watched. Sophie looked at me with old eyes that had seen too many fights and too many celebrations. I told her I had come to say goodbye to the easy way of being small. She laughed, a quick warm sound, and then in a voice that was made of trust, she said, "You always had a backbone under that pretty coat." I told her about the bank and the loan, and watched her listening like the kind of friend who keeps the right kind of silence. She did not mock my plans. Instead, she offered me details, names of accountants who handle the family trust, the times when Evelyn signed things with a steady hand and when she did not, where the files were kept, which drawers had labels that were meaningless and which had real weight. Each small fact Sophie fed me was like a thread I could pull. "Be careful," she said, meaning both danger and caution. She told me about nights when Evelyn forgot to lock the safe, about a file cabinet behind the study bookcase that meant more than a box of old love letters. She told me about the staff's quiet fear when money was short. Suddenly cooks left early, gardeners asked for pay in cash. Sophie's eyes slid to mine and she added, "You can do it. But this won't be tidy." I left the mansion that night with a list of small things and a fierce, steady plan burning like coal in my chest. I had spies in places I had once loved. That felt like both betrayal and protection. In the quiet of my apartment, I wrote the name for the plan on the top of a blank page, ML Estates. Then I sat very still and imagined the way the house would look if the front gate swung on hinges I could control. Liam met me at a small rooftop cafe, the one where he used to sketch plans on napkins when I was his junior designer. He hadn't changed much, still sharp eyes, still the calm of a man who always saw 5 steps ahead. I told him everything. The party, the lockout, the bank manager's hint, Sophie's secret reports. I expected him to tell me I was being dramatic, or emotional, or that revenge was a poor reason to move millions. But he only leaned back, folded his hands, and said, "You've always been better than they knew." His words hit harder than Evelyn's insults. He looked at me the way someone looks at a student who finally remembers her own skill. When I explained the loan renewal risk, he nodded slowly. If the bank sells the note, the buyer owns the debt. And if they default, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. I knew. He knew. The mansion would come up for sale, quietly, without any fancy open house or glossy brochure. "Are you serious about buying it?" he asked. I breathed deeply and said, "Yes, not to live in, to take back my life." He tapped the table twice. "Then I'll back you. I'll handle the financial side. You handle the research." A partnership born from old trust. I felt a strange mix of fear and fire. Liam outlined the steps. Create a holding company that no one could trace to me, gather proof of the Whitmore financial weakness, wait for the loan renewal to fail, then strike. He studied me after he finished, as if checking whether I would break under the weight. "This won't be pretty," he said. "Revenge rarely is. But justice can be clean." I walked away from the cafe feeling taller, like my spine had rediscovered its own shape. The mansion that once pushed me out suddenly felt like something I could choose. Something I could take. Sophie called late at night, whispering like a spy behind enemy lines. I could hear clattering dishes in the background and the faint echo of Evelyn shouting about a misplaced invoice. "She's worried," Sophie said. "She's been on the phone with the accountant for hours." That was my first clue that the house was sliding faster than I expected. Sophie began updating me daily, tiny threads that wove into a full picture. A staff meeting where Evelyn announced tighter budgets. A gardener who quit after his pay was late. Boxes of old paperwork piled in the study. I listened to every detail, my notebook filling with dates and times. "She blames Adam," Sophie whispered during one call. "Says he married wrong. Says you're the reason money is tight." That made me laugh softly in the dark. I had never touched their money. I had only been treated like a cost. One afternoon, Sophie sent me a picture. Evelyn pacing the hall, talking into her phone with a desperate look I'd never seen. Another message. She said if the bank won't renew, we're doomed. The cracks were spreading. I shared everything with Liam, who replied, "Good. Pressure makes people slip." I worried sometimes that Sophie would get caught, but she only brushed my fear away. "The staff knows what she did to you. They're all watching. Some of us are tired of being treated like dust." That surprised me. Her cruelty wasn't reserved for me. It touched everyone in the house. One night, Sophie added quietly, "I think she enjoyed hurting you. People like that need someone to push down to feel tall." I sat on my small sofa, staring at the peeling paint on my walls, and felt something settle inside me. Not rage, not bitterness, something colder. Clarity. The mansion wasn't just a house. It was a stage where Evelyn wrote herself as queen. I was about to take away her stage, and she didn't even know the audience was shifting. The charity event invitation felt like a trap wrapped in gold paper. I almost didn't go, but Sophie insisted. "You need to see it," she said. "See how she acts when she thinks she's winning." So I put on a simple black dress, not expensive, not flashy, just clean lines and quiet strength, and walked up the mansion steps again. Not as family, not even as a guest of honor, just as someone with a ticket and an old story tucked under her ribs. People turned when I entered, surprised to see me. Evelyn spotted me from across the room and glided over with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, darling," she said loudly enough for nearby donors to hear. "You poor thing, still renting?" A little laugh rippled around us. I kept my smile soft. "For now," I said. She blinked, waiting for an apology that never came. I moved through the room slowly, taking in every detail. The two bright flowers meant to hide stress, the wine poured cheaper than usual, the staff working with fewer hands. Evelyn had dressed like royalty, but the cracks were in her eyes. Adam approached me halfway through the event, looking awkward in his tux. "Mom thinks we can all fix this if you come home," he said. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Adam," I said gently, "I'm not coming back." His face fell, and he walked away without finishing his drink. When Evelyn made her next loud comment about women who can't keep a home, I only smiled again. Inside, though, I felt a spark, quiet, sharp and bright. Walking out of the mansion that night felt different. I didn't feel pushed out. I felt like someone waiting for the right moment to step back in. And I knew it was coming. I reopened my design firm 2 weeks later. Maya Loron Designs. My name. My work. My hands. I rented a tiny office with paint still fresh on the walls and set up my old drafting table, the one Adam once said made the house look messy. My first day back, I sat at the desk and felt a soft tremble under my skin. Not fear, but excitement. I reached out to old clients, and to my surprise, many remembered me. "We missed your eye," one said. Another asked if I was taking new projects. Within a month, I had 3 solid contracts. By month 2, I had 6. The real turning point came when the local bank, the same one with the Whitmore loan, asked if I could redesign their main lobby. I walked into their boardroom with my sketches and left with the contract. It felt like a quiet kind of justice. Liam visited one afternoon, leaning over blueprints with the same grin he used to have when I solved a design puzzle. "This is good work," he said. "The kind that gets press." And it did. A local magazine wrote a small feature on "Rising Designer Returns to the Scene." The article didn't mention my marriage. It didn't mention Evelyn. It mentioned me. And that was enough. At night, I worked on plans for the future, my firm, the mansion, the debt note. Each piece felt like a thread I was weaving into a single design. A design of freedom. I checked the mortgage renewal date again and again. It sat on the calendar like a countdown clock. Soon the bank would call the loan due. Soon the Whitmore empire would wobble. And when it did, I would be there. Not begging for a place. Not asking for love. Owning the ground under their feet. 2 days before the loan renewal date, Liam called with news that made my heart race. "We bought the note," he said. Simple words. Huge meaning. ML Estates, LLC, our holding company, now controlled the debt tied to the Whitmore mansion. Evelyn didn't know. Adam didn't know. No one in their world knew that the ground beneath them had already shifted. "When the payment deadline hits," Liam said, "we send the notice. If they can't pay, we move to foreclosure." I sat at my desk staring at my hands, remembering the night I stood in their ballroom trying not to cry. Now I held the power they once used to crush me. Sophie called later, her voice full of secret glee. "Evelyn is terrified," she whispered. "She's been calling every bank in the county trying to refinance, but no one wants the risk." I felt a pang of sympathy, surprising and soft. But then I remembered her words, "You'll never belong here," spoken like a curse. And the sympathy floated away. That evening, Adam showed up at my office without warning. He looked tired, hair messy, tie crooked. "Mom's under a lot of stress," he said, sitting without being asked. "She wants you to make peace." I studied his face and saw the truth. He wanted his comfortable life back. "Adam," I said, "the person you married doesn't exist anymore." He left angry, not knowing that I now held his mother's future in one signed document. When the clock hit midnight, I felt the shift. The loan renewal window closed. The Whitmores had missed their payment. And the mansion, Evelyn's pride, Adam's shield, was now one step closer to becoming mine. The morning after the payment window closed, I woke before sunrise. I sat at my kitchen table with tea growing cold beside me, knowing a storm was about to begin. Liam had drafted the default notice, crisp and formal, the kind of letter that could change everything with a single sentence. Before he sent it, Adam called again. "We need to talk," he said. His voice was different this time, tight, strained, almost small. We met at a cafe halfway between my world and his. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept all night. "Mom says you're spreading lies," he began. "About loans and money problems." I stirred my tea slowly. I haven't said a word. That stopped him. He leaned back in his chair, confused. "Then why is she panicking?" he muttered. That question hung between us like smoke. I didn't answer. He wouldn't understand, even if I tried. He reached for my hand the way he used to when we were young and simple, but I moved mine away. "Maya," he said quietly, "can't you just let this go? Whatever happened that night, we can fix it." A strange calm washed over me. "Adam, you watched your mother humiliate me. You stood there and did nothing. That can't be fixed." His face reddened, and he almost argued, but he swallowed the words. "Mom needs peace," he said instead. I almost laughed. "So did I answered. We sat in silence. Then he asked if I would come to a family dinner to smooth things over. I said no. I wasn't smoothing anything. Not anymore. When I walked away, I felt no guilt, only clarity. That afternoon, Liam pressed send on the default notice. The message went directly to Evelyn's inbox. "Payment required in full," it read. "Failure to pay will result in foreclosure proceedings." Somewhere in that mansion, maybe in the very hall where she had told me I didn't belong. Evelyn read those words, and the clock on her world began to tick. Sophie called me only minutes after the default notice arrived. I could hear voices rising in the background, footsteps thudding across marble. "She's screaming," Sophie whispered. "She's saying someone must have made a mistake, that the bank would never do this to a Whitmore." I walked to my window and watched cars pass under the slow morning sun. "What is she doing now?" I asked. Sophie paused. "She's calling every lender she knows. She's yelling at Adam. She even threw a vase." I imagined the scene. Evelyn pacing the length of the study, pearls tight against her throat, the walls echoing with anger she couldn't hide anymore. "Has she figured out who owns the debt?" I asked. "No," Sophie said. "She's terrified it might be someone she offended." That made me smile, a small private smile. She had offended many. For once, her cruelty circled back. By evening, the mansion shifted into quiet chaos. Staff hours were cut, deliveries were halted, chefs whispered about missing pay. Sophie's messages came like tiny windows into their unraveling world. She blamed Adam at dinner, one message read. She said he should have married better. Another, she says you cursed her. But the one that struck me most came late at night. Adam said you would have helped if she hadn't pushed you out. I think he knows something broke for good. I went to sleep with the soft hum of the city outside my window and Evelyn's panic echoing in the back of my mind. Not gloating, not cheering, just watching the balance finally shift. Because no empire survives when built on cruelty. And hers was beginning to crumble. The brunch invitation arrived the next weekend, written in Evelyn's perfect cursive, as if ink could disguise desperation. I almost stayed home, but something in me wanted to see it, to witness the cracks for myself. I wore a simple blouse and black pants, walking into the mansion not as family, not as guest, but as someone who no longer feared her. The room was full of polite chatter, but the air felt thin. People noticed the strain around Evelyn's eyes. Adam hovered near her like a nervous shadow. When she saw me, she froze for half a breath, then smiled with icy precision. "Maya," she said, "how brave of you to come." Brave. The word felt like a dare. I nodded and took a seat at the long table. I barely touched my food. Neither did she. When a neighbor praised my recently reopened firm, news traveled fast. Evelyn's lips tightened. "Oh, that little hobby," she said loud enough for the table. "How sweet. I do love when charity cases find something to keep them busy." People shifted uncomfortably. Adam looked down. I leaned toward her, voice low and calm. "Be careful," I whispered. "You might end up my tenant." Her fork clattered. "What is that supposed to mean?" she snapped. "You'll see," I said simply. She turned pale and excused herself. I left before dessert came, walking out into bright sunlight. I felt no guilt for the fear in her eyes. She had planted those seeds herself. For the first time since the lockout, I felt the power she had once stolen from me return to my hands. And I wasn't done. Hit subscribe for more true revenge stories. By midweek, the cracks in Evelyn's empire widened into fractures. Her interior design business, her pride, her proof she was more than money, began losing clients. She didn't understand why, but I did. I wasn't sabotaging her. I was simply outbidding her with better work, cleaner proposals, and a design I sharpened by years she never saw. One of her old clients, a hotel owner, called my firm. "We heard you're doing fresh work," he said. "We're looking to move in a new direction." A subtle blow to Evelyn. Another client left her for me the following week. Word spread quietly, softly like a tide. I didn't brag. I didn't even smile about it. I just worked. Long nights, early mornings, coffee and pencil shavings. My office filled with sketches, rulers, fabric swatches. I felt alive in a way the mansion never allowed. One afternoon, a journalist reached out asking to feature my work in a local lifestyle column. When the article came out, a paragraph read, "Maya Loran brings fresh vision to luxury design, offering a modern contrast to older firms." I didn't mention Evelyn's name, but everyone in her circle knew who the older firm was. At dinner parties, people whispered about my comeback, about the Whitmore mansion being under financial review, about Evelyn's strained smile. Sophie's messages grew sharper, She's losing it, she wrote. She thinks someone is trying to ruin her. I didn't need to. She was doing that herself. One night, I paused while organizing a set of custom samples. I realized something important. This wasn't just revenge. This was me reclaiming the life I abandoned for love that wasn't love at all. And as my business grew, her world shrank. The balance was finally shifting the way it should have long ago. The phone call from the bank came while I was reviewing fabric palettes. A polite voice said, "Ms. Laurent, the Whitmore loan has officially defaulted. As the note holder, ML Estates may proceed as you see fit." I thanked him calmly, but my hands trembled after I hung up. It was real now. The mansion was hanging by a thread, and I held the scissors. Meanwhile, Evelyn tried one last desperate move, refinancing. She went to the bank dressed in pearls and confidence, expecting the world to bow. Instead, the banker told her, "You will need to speak with ML Estates." Evelyn slammed her hand on the desk. "Who is that? Who controls my loan?" The banker just smiled politely. "Confidential." That word followed her home like a shadow. Sophie told me that Evelyn spent the rest of the day pacing the mansion halls whispering, "Who? Who? Who?" like a broken clock. That same evening, Adam showed up at my apartment again, holding divorce papers. "Look," he said, swallowing hard. "Mom wants everything quiet. If we sign now, maybe things calm down." I read the papers, and then signed them without blinking. He seemed shocked. "You're okay with this?" "Yes," I said softly. "This is what I want." He left thinking I had finally let go. But in truth, I had freed myself from every tie they thought they had on me. The mansion's fate was no longer tangled with my marriage. It was mine to decide. As I closed the door behind him, my apartment felt less small, less temporary. The walls didn't feel like walls anymore. They felt like breath. And I knew the next phase of the plan was ready to begin. The next morning, Evelyn tried once more to claw her way out of the hole she dug. She marched into the bank wearing diamonds in fury, demanding a meeting with whoever is responsible. She expected power to respond to power, but the clerk simply repeated, "You must speak with your new creditor, ML Estates." That name, my name hidden behind letters, rattled her. Sophie later told me she returned home white as chalk. She kept saying, "Someone is after me. Someone wants my house." She wasn't wrong, but she wasn't ready for the truth either. While she spiraled, I went back to my office, moving through my tasks with slow, steady calm. I had emails from clients, new design requests, and a meeting with a materials vendor. My life was full again, not with their chaos, but with my purpose. That afternoon I got a message from a reporter asking for a comment on the rumors of financial trouble at the Whitmore mansion. I gave no comment. Silence can carry more weight than any quote. By evening, whispers had spread through every corner of Evelyn's social circle. Friends canceled lunches. Donors backed out of events. Her phone rang nonstop, but fewer people answered hers. Adam called me once, his voice tight. "Mom hasn't eaten. She's a mess. Whatever you're doing, stop." I didn't respond. He still didn't understand. This wasn't about hurting them. This was about balance. About truth. About justice. And justice was already walking up their front steps. When I turned off the lights in my office that night, I paused at the door and looked back. My sketches were pinned neatly on the wall. My rulers aligned. My pens kept. My name, my real name, was on the door. I whispered to myself, "You're almost there." And for the first time, I believed it. 2 days later, Adam called again, but this time the tone was different, flat, resigned, like someone who finally realized the ship was sinking. "We need to finalize the divorce," he said. "Mom wants everything private." We met in a small lawyer's office with bland paintings on the walls. He sat stiffly, hands clasped, while the lawyer slid papers across the desk. The room smelled like old paper and stale coffee. I read every line. There was nothing to fight over. Nothing I wanted. No property, no inheritance, no shared accounts. Just closure. Adam tapped his fingers nervously. "I didn't think it would end like this," he said. "I thought we'd grow old together." His voice had that soft ache I remembered from our early years, but it no longer pulled at me. "You chose her side," I said gently. "And you stayed there." He looked down. "I didn't know she would." He stopped. because even he couldn't excuse what she did at the party. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "It was too late." I signed the papers. He stared at my signature like it was a door closing. Maybe it was. When he left, he didn't look back. I walked out of the building into warm sunlight, feeling lighter than I had in years. Divorce wasn't failure. It was release. And now nothing tied me to the Whitmore name. Not legally, not emotionally, not socially. I was free to finish what I had started. When I got home, Liam had already sent me the next steps. "The foreclosure notice goes out tomorrow," he wrote. "You ready?" Was I ready? Yes, more than ready. I sat by the window, watching dusk settle, and whisper the words I had carried since the lockout. I will not be small again. Rumors spread through town like wind pushing leaves. People whispered outside bakeries and at gas stations, telling stories they only half understood. The Whitmore mansion might be in trouble. I heard the bank refuse them. Evelyn lost 3 clients last week. Social circles that once bowed to her now stepped back. Wealthy families who had praised her last month avoided her calls. Even her closest friends acted like she carried bad luck in her purse. Sophie messaged me with updates. "She's furious," one text read, then sad, then furious again. Another message said, "She blames you for everything. Says you cursed her house." I sat in my office reading these words with a strange mixture of sadness and justice. I didn't hate Evelyn. I never did. I hated what she chose to be. One evening, I drove by the mansion on my way home. I slowed at the gate, seeing the once bright lantern flicker weakly. The flowers near the walkway were wilting. The lawn had brown patches. Staff had been cut after all. It looked tired, like a queen losing her crown. I didn't stop. I just watched from the street, unseen. I thought of the years I spent trying to fit into a world that was never meant for me. I thought of the girl I used to be, quiet, soft-spoken, eager to please. She was gone now. In her place stood someone stronger. Someone who understood her worth, even when others didn't. I drove home through quiet roads, my windows down, letting the night air cool the warmth rising in my chest. The storm was almost at its peak. And when the next week arrived, the final moment would come with it. I got the call from Liam early in the morning. "The bank approved the foreclosure," he said. "Auction is next week." For a moment, I didn't breathe. Then everything rushed in at once. Relief, fear, excitement, disbelief. It was happening. The mansion would be for sale. And no one knew the buyer waiting in the shadows was me. "Are you ready for the step?" Liam asked. "Once we do this, there's no turning back." I looked around my apartment, the sketches on my wall, the clean desk, the plants Sophie had given me years ago. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming every part of myself I had lost. "I'm ready," I said. Sophie called later, her voice buzzing with urgency. Evelyn found out about the foreclosure. She almost fainted. She thinks the bank betrayed her. I felt a tug of sympathy, but it didn't hold me for long. Actions have consequences, even when dressed in pearls. I spent that week preparing. I organized the risks, the numbers, the future plans for the property. I didn't imagine myself living in it. I imagined transforming it into something better. Something healing. Something mine. When the night before the auction came, I sat in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling my heart beat slow and steady. Tomorrow would be the day everything changed. The day the house that spit me out would open its doors again, this time on my terms. I slept lightly, wakeful with purpose. Before dawn, I whispered to myself, "You're not taking it from them. You're taking it back." The auction room felt like a courtroom. Bright lights, rows of chairs, people shifting in quiet tension. Liam stood beside me, calm as stone. I kept my hood low, my posture indifferent. I didn't want anyone to recognize me too soon. When Evelyn entered, everything changed. She wore a stiff beige suit, hair pulled tight, eyes wild with fear. Adam followed her, trying to soothe her, but she shook his hand away. She scanned the room like someone searching for a life raft in a storm. Then her gaze landed on me. For a second, she didn't react. Then her eyes widened. "You," she whispered. She stumbled backward as if she'd seen a ghost. Whispers rippled across the room. I stayed seated, calm, controlled. Liam placed a hand lightly on my shoulder, a reminder that I wasn't alone. The auctioneer began. The mansion opened at a shockingly low number. Bidders raised their paddles. Developers, older couples, a man with a sharp suit. Then Liam lifted our paddle. Evelyn gasped. Adam stood frozen. With every bid, her world cracked more. "Stop!" she hissed at one point, stepping forward. "That's my home." The auctioneer ignored her. I stayed silent, letting Liam handle the numbers. When the bidding narrowed to just one other buyer, Liam nodded to me. I lifted the paddle myself. The room fell into a hush. The final bid rang like thunder. The gavel dropped. "Sold." Evelyn's knees buckled. Adam caught her. I stood calm, steady, unshaken. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply turned and walked out the door. The mansion was mine. News travels fast in a town that feeds on gossip. By midday, the headlines had already appeared online. Whitmore Mansion sold to anonymous buyer at foreclosure auction. I sat in my office, reading the article twice, letting the words settle into my bones. Anonymous. That meant Evelyn didn't yet know the full truth, that the woman she pushed out of her grand halls now held the deed to every hallway, every chandelier, every stone step she once guarded. Liam texted me a photo of the signed paperwork. "It's done," he wrote. "Simple. Final." I drove past the mansion that evening. The gate stood slightly open, as if confused about its new owner. My fingers brushed the steering wheel. I didn't pull in. I just sat there across the street like a quiet ghost watching the windows glow in the dark. Inside those walls, Evelyn was packing. Sophie had sent me pictures. Jewelry boxes open, dresses shoved into suitcases, priceless paintings wrapped in towels because she didn't trust staff anymore. "She keeps saying it's a mistake," Sophie texted. "She thinks Adam will talk the bank into fixing it. But nothing could fix it now." The house was slipping through her fingers, and I didn't feel triumph, just a strange, heavy stillness. I drove away before anyone saw me. When I got home, I laid the ownership papers on my table. My name, Maya Loran, signed in clean ink. The mansion was mine, but I didn't feel like celebrating. Not yet. Something inside me whispered, this isn't the end. Not until she knows. I turned off the lights and sat in the quiet. Outside, the city hummed its usual night song. Inside, everything felt like it was waiting. For the reveal, for the fallout, for the moment Evelyn would finally understand whose hand now held her world. The next morning Sophie sent a string of messages, so fast my phone buzzed nonstop. "She's packing everything," one said. "She's yelling at Adam." Another, "She thinks whoever bought the house hates her." Then the last message came with a photo, a suitcase by the front door, Evelyn sitting beside it, shoulders slumped like a deflated balloon. For the first time, she looked small. Not powerful. Just human. I didn't feel joy in it. Only a quiet ache. I went to the mansion that afternoon, stopping at the edge of the long driveway. The house seemed to hum with memory. Places I once dusted, rooms I once decorated, corners where Evelyn's sharp voice lived like a stain. I didn't go inside. I wasn't ready. Instead, I walked the path slowly, touching the iron gate as if greeting an old friend that had once turned its back on me. "It's mine now," I whispered, but the words didn't bring the rush I expected. Later that night, while reviewing design plans, I felt a tug in my chest, something uncertain. Revenge had power, but it also carried weight. I stared at the blueprint of the mansion spread on my desk. Every room had a story. Every story had a scar. And now all of it belonged to me. I wasn't done. Not by far. But I didn't want to become the same kind of ruler Evelyn had been. I wanted something else. Something cleaner. Something that felt like starting over instead of stomping down. That made the next step clear. She had to leave. But the reveal had to be perfect. Silent. I texted Sophie back. "Wait one more day. I'll handle everything soon." The house wasn't just a symbol anymore. It was a turning point. And I was standing at the threshold, deciding what kind of person I would be when I finally stepped inside. I wasn't surprised when the news leaked. This town lived on whispers. But I didn't expect the headline to hit so fast or so loud. Foreclosure buyer revealed. Mansion now owned by Maya Loran, former Whitmore family member. I stared at the screen, my breath catching for a moment. So this was how the truth came out. No speech. No announcement. Just a journalist with sharp instincts and good timing. The article spread like wildfire. Screenshots, shares, comments. Is this real? Did she buy Evelyn's house? Revenge level. Expert. I stayed quiet. Silence sometimes says more than shouting. It didn't take long before my phone rang nonstop. Clients asking questions. Friends sending shocked emojis. Even Liam sent a message. Well, that saves us the trouble of telling anyone. But the message I waited for never came from Adam. He stayed silent, probably stunned. Sophie sent another text. She saw the article. She screamed. Then she cried. Then she went silent. I imagined that moment. Evelyn staring at her screen, realizing the woman she dismissed like garbage now held the deed to her kingdom. It wasn't joy I felt. It wasn't gloating. It was a release, like a knot loosening in my chest. That night, reporters stood outside my office asking, "Is this revenge?" I simply walked past them. No statement. No smile. No bragging. My silence became the story. Online comments grew heavier. She played the long game. The daughter-in-law won. Evelyn finally met her match. When I turned off the lights in my apartment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, peace. Not because I won, but because I had claimed a part of myself they once tried to erase. And tomorrow, the world would ask me questions. But for tonight, quiet victory filled the room like a soft, steady glow. The next morning, the reporters were waiting outside the design studio. Cameras, microphones, bright lights, all aimed at me the second I stepped out of my car. "Ms. Laurent, did you buy the mansion as payback? Is this a personal vendetta? Did you force Evelyn out?" I paused on the steps, not flustered, not scared. Just ready. If I let others control the story, they'd twist it. So I faced the cameras with a calm I didn't know I could hold. "Good morning," I said, voice steady. "I know there are many questions. So let me answer the biggest one." The crowd hushed. Why did I buy the mansion? I took a breath. Simple. It was available. Murmurs rippled through the reporters. I continued. Homes go into foreclosure. People buy them. I bought one. The rest is history. No mention of betrayal. No mention of a party. No mention of Evelyn telling me I didn't belong. That truth didn't need retelling. It lived on the internet forever. "Is this revenge?" the reporter shouted. I held his gaze. No. It's business. Another question flew out, something about family disputes. "I wish the Whitmore family well," I said. That line hit the internet like a spark. Cameras flashed. My clip played on social media within minutes. People called it iconic. Calm. Powerful. The perfect mic drop. I didn't feel powerful, though. I felt free. Liam texted, "You handled that like a queen." Sophie texted, "She broke another vase after watching your clip." I sat behind my desk after the crowd dispersed, letting my pulse slow. I had spoken my truth, plain, steady, unshaken. And now, the world knew the mansion was mine. The door to the next chapter swung open wide. I was finally ready to walk inside. The first time I entered the mansion as its owner, the silence felt heavy. Not cruel, just deep, like the house itself was holding its breath. I stepped through the grand doors slowly, touching the wood Evelyn once polished with pride. The hall smelled faintly of old perfume and lemon cleaner. My footsteps echoed off the marble floors. Every sound reminded me of a moment when I had stood here feeling small, unwanted, intruding. Now the house felt different. Not hostile, just waiting. I walked room to room, letting memories rise, not to hurt me, but to release me. The ballroom where she insulted my dress. The study where she whispered about proper families. The staircase, she never let me decorate because she said my taste was too simple. I traced the banister with my fingertips. "This time it's mine," I whispered. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, lighting dust in the air like tiny floating stars. I paused in the dining room, remembering quiet dinners filled with sharp comments, where Adam always looked at his plate. Now the long table stood empty, chairs tucked in neatly. The space felt lighter without them. Upstairs, I passed the bedroom Adam and I once shared. I didn't go in. Some doors needed more time. Instead, I walked to the balcony, overlooking the garden. The breeze smelled of jasmine. Below, the fountain Evelyn adored was dry, cracked, neglected. It reminded me of her, polished on the outside, hollow underneath. I stood there for a long time, letting the quiet wrap around me. This mansion had been used as a weapon, a symbol of exclusion, a place sharpened to cut me. Now it was my canvas, my project, my future. I wasn't sure yet what I'd turn it into. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: it would never again be a place where someone felt small. It would become something new, something healing, something that finally belonged to me. Evelyn showed up 2 days later without warning. I saw her through the tall glass doors, stiff posture, perfect hair, pearls clinging to her neck like they feared falling. She knocked once, sharp and impatient, as if the mansion still listened to her. I opened the door calmly. Her eyes swept over the entrance hall, landing on me with a mixture of disbelief and pride swallowed by desperation. "Sell it back to me," she said. "No greeting, no apology, just demand. Double the price. Whatever you paid, I'll match it twice." I stepped aside only slightly, enough for her to see the foyer behind me, but not enough to invite her in. "Evelyn," I said softly, "you told me I'd never belong here. Remember?" Her face tightened. That was irrelevant. "No," I said. "It was the foundation of everything." She flinched. For the first time, I saw cracks in her confidence, not tiny ones, but deep, spreading lines that fear had carved. "This house is my family's legacy," she snapped. "My mother built our reputation here. My dining room hosted governors. My name is tied to these walls." "Your name was," I corrected. "Now it's mine." Her breath hitched, and her voice dropped. "You don't understand. I need this house." "Why?" I asked. "To keep pretending your world never cracked." Her eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears back quickly. Evelyn wasn't someone who cried in front of others. "You don't deserve this house," she whispered. I stepped closer. "You don't get to decide that anymore." Silence wrapped around us. Heavy. Final. She straightened, gathering the last pieces of pride she could. "One day," she said quietly, "you will regret this." I didn't answer. She turned sharply and walked down the steps, her heels tapping across the stone like a fading heartbeat. I watched her go without anger, without victory, without pity, just truth. I closed the door and leaned against it, letting out a deep breath. The house felt different again, lighter, stronger mine. And Evelyn finally knew it too. I didn't expect Adam to come next. But the same evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, his car pulled up the driveway. He stepped out slowly, hands shaking, eyes dull with fatigue. I met him at the door but did not invite him in. He looked around the entrance, as if trying to reconcile the house he grew up in with the reality of seeing me standing there as its owner. "You've destroyed my mother," he said. His voice wavered, not with anger, something closer to wounded disbelief. "She hasn't slept. She barely eats. She cries, Maya. She actually cries." I folded my arms. "Adam, your mother destroyed herself. I just refused to carry her weight anymore." He winced. "You could have walked away. You didn't have to take the house. She threw me out of it." I reminded him gently. The day after she humiliated me in front of everyone. He looked down, hands flexing. "She was cruel. I know that. But this is too much." I studied him. His shoulders sagged. His tie was crooked. His voice trembled in ways I had never heard. "Adam," I said, "you chose her every time. Even when she was wrong. Even when she hurt me." "She's my mother," he whispered. "And I was your wife," I replied. His eyes closed as if my words stung. "I didn't know she'd fall apart like this." I sighed. She didn't fall apart because of the house. She fell apart because she built her identity on ownership, not love. He opened his eyes and looked at the chandelier above us, something sad flickering across his face. "You made it beautiful," he said quietly. "I always knew you would." I didn't respond. He turned to leave, pausing at the steps. "I'm sorry," he said softly, "for all of it." I let the words fall where they landed. True, too late, and unable to change a thing. The mansion needed air. New breath. New purpose. I wandered through the halls for hours, imagining what this place could become if I peeled away the old layers of superiority and fear. On a quiet morning, I sat at the long dining table Evian once used to impress politicians and donors. Paper spread around me, sketches, budgets, ideas scribbled in the margins. A retreat, a school, a safe place, a home for women who needed a fresh start. I could almost see it. The rooms filled with laughter instead of judgment, the hallways lined with art created by hands that once trembled with uncertainty, the gardens blooming under the care of people finally given a chance. So I decided the mansion would transform into a women's business retreat and design school. A place where women could learn, grow, and rebuild. A place where no one would be told they didn't belong. I met with Liam in the ballroom to discuss logistics. Sunlight hit the chandeliers like scattered diamonds. "You're turning a symbol of exclusion into a place of empowerment," he said. "That's poetic." "It feels right," I said. We walked through each room, imagining future workshops, mentorship programs, and studios filled with tools and color. "It will take time," he warned. "And money." "I know," I said. "I'm ready." When I announced the plan to the community, the reaction surprised me. Messages poured in, women wanting to attend, others seeking to volunteer, businesses offering sponsorship. Word traveled quickly, and people loved the idea. Some called it brave, some called it bold, some called it necessary. As I finalized the first renovation orders, I walked out to the garden and breathed in the warm morning air. The mansion no longer felt heavy with old ghosts. It felt like soil ready for seeds. And I knew, as surely as I knew my own name, that this transformation was only the beginning. The opening night arrived faster than I expected. Lights draped the entrance. Soft music flowed through the courtyard, and laughter bounced off the walls that once held only whispered judgment. Women from across the city stepped through the doors. Entrepreneurs, artists, students, mothers, each one glowing with a sense of possibility. Cameramen and reporters gathered by the gate, capturing every moment. I wore a simple white dress, clean and elegant, nothing like the gowns Evelyn once insisted were proper. Liam stood beside me with quiet pride as the crowd grew. I greeted guests, guided them through the new studios, and watched their eyes widen at the bright, open spaces. "This feels safe," one woman whispered. That alone made everything worth it. During the event, I stepped outside to breathe. The night air was warm, and the lights cast a soft glow over the lawn. That's when I saw her, Evelyn, standing behind the iron gate like a ghost at the edge of a world she no longer ruled. She wore a simple coat, hair unstyled, eyes wide with something fragile. Not anger, not rage, something closer to grief. She watched the people entering the mansion. She watched them smile. She watched them belong. But she didn't cross the gate. Couldn't. For a moment, our eyes met. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just stood there, a figure outside her former kingdom. A figure looking in at everything she once kept out. I didn't wave. I didn't gesture. I didn't invite her inside. Not out of spite. Out of boundaries. Out of truth. I turned back to the retreat as applause rose from inside. The mansion was alive again, reborn not through wealth or status, but through purpose. And for the first time, it truly felt like home. When the time came to give my opening speech, the ballroom grew still. Cameras pointed toward the stage. Guests leaned forward, and I stood where Evelyn once reminded me I didn't belong. The lights felt warm on my skin, not harsh. My voice felt steady, not small. "Thank you for being here," I began. This place once held a different meaning. A meaning built on walls, on expectations, on the idea that belonging was something you had to earn through perfection. Murmurs filled the room. "I was told once that I didn't belong here," I continued. "So I built a new definition of belonging, one that includes anyone willing to learn, to grow, to dream." A soft wave of emotion swept through the crowd. Liam watched from the corner, pride glowing in his eyes. This mansion isn't about the past anymore. It's about the future. It's about giving women the tools to build their own doors when others are slammed in their faces. Applause swelled, warm and full. For every woman who was told she wasn't enough, I said, "This place is yours. You belong here." A standing ovation followed. The applause felt like healing, like closure, like truth. Guests surrounded me afterward, shaking my hand, thanking me, sharing stories of their own struggles. It felt like the mansion was breathing again. Later, as the event wound down, I stood at the balcony overlooking the lit garden. I closed my eyes and let the night breeze wrap around me. This moment, this quiet triumph, was everything I had fought for. Not revenge. Not victory. Freedom. And as the last guests drifted away, I felt something in my heart settle into place like a final puzzle piece clicking home. The lawsuit came 3 days after the opening. Thick envelope. Gold lettering. A familiar signature at the bottom. Evelyn Whitmore. She was suing me for emotional distress, claiming I had intentionally humiliated her, destabilized her life, and stolen her home through manipulation. I sat at my office table, turning each page slowly. It almost made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. When people like Evelyn lost control, they didn't look inward. They attacked. Liam stormed in moments, later holding his own copy. "This is nonsense," he said. "And she knows it." My lawyer read through it and shook his head. "There's no argument here. You bought a legal foreclosure property. Everything was documented." Still, Evelyn's claim brought media attention again. Headlines popped up online. Whitmore matriarch fights back. Is the mansion battle over? But the comment sections told the real story. Most people saw the truth. Some even defended me with details I never shared publicly. She was kicked out. The Whitmores treated her terribly. This isn't revenge. This is karma. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom felt cold and still. Evelyn arrived in a deep black dress, trying to look wounded and fragile. Adam walked beside her but didn't meet my eyes. When the judge entered, everyone rose. Evelyn's lawyer began with grand claims, how she had lost her reputation, her home, her stability. How I, a former family member, had targeted her on purpose. Then he paused dramatically and pointed at me. She weaponized the foreclosure process against an innocent family. My lawyer stood calmly. "Your Honor, here are the records proving we legally purchased the bank note 4 months prior. Every step was done correctly." He placed document after document on the table. Signed. Stamped. Dated. Unshakable. The judge skimmed the files, sighed, and looked directly at Evelyn. "There is no legal basis for your claim," she said. "This case is dismissed." The gavel hit. One sharp sound. Evelyn gasped like someone had slapped her. I simply exhaled, a slow, steady breath I had been holding since the night she told me I didn't belong. Evelyn showed up 2 days later, not with anger, not with lawyers, not with threats. She came alone. No pearls, no stiff posture, no perfect hair. She stood outside the gate until one of the retreat volunteers told me she was there. I hesitated before walking out to meet her. The woman waiting for me wasn't the Evelyn I knew. She looked older, like 5 years had passed in 5 weeks. Her eyes were softer, not sharp enough to cut anymore. "I need to talk to you," she said quietly. There was no command in her voice, just fragility. We walked to a small bench in the garden. She sat slowly, folding her shaking hands in her lap. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "I ruined everything." She stared at the dried fountain, the one she used to brag about to visitors. "I wanted to protect our name, the Whitmore name." She swallowed hard, but I was so afraid of losing status. I didn't see who I became. Hearing her speak without venom felt strange, like meeting a stranger wearing the face of someone I once feared. "You didn't just lose a house," I said gently. "You lost yourself long before that." Her eyes filled with tears. Real ones. Not the stage kind. "I hurt you," she said. "I hurt you more than I understood." I nodded. I wasn't there to soothe her. "I can't ask for forgiveness," she whispered. "I don't deserve it." "Forgiveness isn't the point," I said. "Growth is." She let out a shaky breath. "How did you do it? How did you survive all of this?" I looked around the garden, the blooming roses, the new benches, the open windows filled with laughter from retreat participants. "I rebuilt," I said. "Piece by piece." She nodded, absorbing my words like medicine that burned going down. "If I start over," she said softly, "will it matter?" "Yes," I answered. "If you mean it." She stood, wiped her eyes, and walked away quietly. No drama. No final insult. Just a woman finally realizing the cost of her own cruelty. After Evelyn's visit, I found myself sitting alone in my office, staring at an old journal I hadn't touched in years. The cover was worn, the edges bent, the pages full of a younger me, hopeful, insecure, eager to please. I opened to an entry written during my first month living in the mansion. I just want them to see my worth. I want them to accept me. I traced the words with my fingertip. That girl had been so small, shrinking herself so Evelyn wouldn't feel threatened, choosing silence over truth, choosing peace over self-respect. I felt a pang of sadness for her. She deserved better. I flipped through more pages, sketches for designs Evelyn mocked, notes about Adam's excuses for her behavior, lists of ways I tried to impress them. Then I reached the most painful page, the night after Evelyn locked me out. Maybe she's right. Maybe I don't belong. I have nothing left. My throat tightened as I read it. I remembered that night. The cold air, the humiliation burning under my skin, the way I'd folded into myself like collapsing paper. I took a deep breath and closed the journal. Then I opened it again and crossed out a line. The line that had shaped too many of my choices. I'll make them see my worth. I drew a single line through it. Not in anger. In release. And under it, with a calm hand, I wrote. I see it myself now. The words looked stronger than I expected. Clear. Simple. True. I closed the journal for the last time and placed it in a drawer, not to forget, but to honor the girl who survived long enough for me to become the woman I was now. That chapter of my life was over. And this time, I was the one turning the page. The first award nomination came from a local magazine. The second from a regional design council. The third, from a national architectural organization, made me sit down because my legs suddenly felt weak. Architectural Visionary of the Year. My firm, my designs, my work, things Evelyn once called cute little hobbies, were now being recognized on a level I never imagined. I traveled to the award ceremony in a midnight blue dress that felt like strength stitched into fabric. Cameras flashed when I stepped onto the stage. The announcer said my name with pride, not as someone's wife, not as someone's burden, but as a creator, a builder, a leader. When I accepted the award, I looked out at the crowd and felt something warm spread in my chest. This award isn't just about design, I said into the microphone. It's about rebuilding. I paused. It's about turning pain into purpose, walls into windows, and lost chances into second beginnings. The room erupted in applause. Afterward, someone from Architectural Digest asked for an interview. A famous designer congratulated me. Liam hugged me and whispered, "You earned every bit of this." That night, I returned to the mansion and stood outside beneath the moonlight. The house glowed softly behind me, no longer imposing, just beautiful. I thought about how far I had come, from being pushed out of this place to being celebrated with it in the background of every article. When I walked through the front door, the staff, now part of my team, cheered and clapped. There were flowers, confetti cannons, laughter. I felt tears prick my eyes, not from sadness but from the deep knowing that I had built this life myself. That early journal entry, the one where I questioned my worth, felt like it belonged to someone else. Someone I loved, someone I had outgrown. And as I set the award on the mantel, I whispered, "We made it." A week later, I invited the household staff, every cook, every gardener, every cleaner who had ever worked under Evelyn's rigid rule, to dinner at the mansion. They arrived hesitantly at first, unsure if this was real. But when they stepped inside and saw the warm lights, the tables covered in homemade dishes, and me standing there with open arms, something shifted. "This is for you," I told them. "For everything you gave us home." Sophie hugged me, so tightly I almost lost my breath. "I never imagined we'd be welcomed through the front door," she said. We all sat at the long table, the same one where Evelyn once scolded staff for small mistakes. But tonight, people laughed, shared stories, told jokes. The gardeners described the rose garden's hidden corners. The cooks told stories of kitchen disasters they'd never dared admit before. It felt like a family reunion, except this time, it was the family I chose. At dessert, I stood and raised a glass. "You held this house together," I said. "While others took credit, you did the work. You kept things running. You kept me sane. And tonight, we honor you." Tears shone in more than one pair of eyes. "Thank you," Sophie whispered. After dinner, we walked through the mansion as a group, laughing, sharing memories, pointing at old corners with new meaning. I realized something beautiful. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. The walls didn't echo with old judgments. The air didn't hold its breath. It felt alive. It felt generous. It felt like the home it was always meant to be. And as the staff left that night with plates of leftovers and full hearts, I knew we had rewritten the story of this house together. And this time, everyone belonged. As the retreat grew, I kept thinking about one quiet corner of the mansion, the East Wing. It had always been Evelyn's favorite area. Her private studio, her mirror-lined dressing room, the balcony where she drank tea while judging neighbors. For weeks, I avoided it. Part of me didn't want to touch those rooms, as if they held the last echo of the woman who once ruled this home. But one morning, while reviewing renovation plans, I realized something. Healing isn't about avoiding scars. It's about shaping them into something new. So I walked into the East Wing alone. Dust floated gently in the sunlight. The room was empty, stripped bare after Evelyn packed her things. Just walls. Just space. Just possibility. I sat on the old window seat and allowed every memory, every insult, every dismissal, every moment she tried to shrink me, to drift through my mind like passing clouds. They didn't sting anymore. They didn't hold power. They were simply moments that led me here. That's when the idea came to me. Simple, surprising, right? I would keep the wing intact, but I would rename it. Not to mock her, not to erase her, to honor the truth. When I announced the decision at a retreat meeting, the staff reacted with confusion at first, then understanding, then emotion. This will be called the Evelyn Wing, I said. Not because of what she did, but because of what it taught me. Even cruelty can shape strength. Even pain can plant seeds of change. Some women applauded. Others wiped their eyes. Sophie whispered, "That's exactly the kind of grace she never had." And maybe that was true. But I didn't choose the name for Evelyn. I chose it for every woman who had ever been torn down and chose to rise anyway. The wing opened a month later, with soft lighting, a library and mentoring rooms. A space built from hurt, but meant for healing. As I stood under the sign with her name on it, I felt no bitterness. Only peace. Only closure. Only freedom. Liam and I had worked side by side for months. Late nights, early mornings, shared plans scribbled on whiteboards and napkins. What began as partnership slowly deepened into something gentler, warmer, and far more frightening than anything I had planned. It happened gradually. The way he stayed late to help paint the studio walls, the way he noticed when I skipped lunch, the way he listened, really listened, when I talked about the old pain I was still unwinding. One evening, after reviewing budgets in the study, he closed the notebook and looked at me with quiet intensity. "You know," he said, "you rebuilt yourself brick by brick. I just supplied a little mortar." I smiled, but something in my chest fluttered. "You did more than that," I said softly. He reached across the table, his hand warm over mine. "Maya, you didn't just buy a house," he said. "You built a life." I felt my breath catch. For so long, I thought love had to look like sacrifice, shrinking, softening, bending around another person's world. Liam showed me something different. Love that partners with you, stands beside you, celebrates your growth instead of fearing it. After the retreat closed for the night, we walked through the quiet mansion, past the glowing hallways and newly painted rooms. When we reached the grand staircase, he paused and looked at me the way someone looks at a sunrise. Slow, awed, grateful. "May I?" he asked, gently brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. I nodded. The kiss was soft, steady, true. It didn't feel like escape. It felt like arriving. We stood there for a long moment, holding on to the quiet. The mansion, once a place that taught me fear, now held this new beginning without shadows. When he whispered, "Whatever life you build next, I hope I'm part of it," I knew my answer before the words left my lips. "You already are." A few years passed, full of life and sunlight. The retreat grew. My design firm thrived. The mansion became everything I dreamed it could be. And one warm afternoon, as I was reviewing workshop schedules, the front gate buzzer rang. I saw the name on the screen and froze. Adam. I hadn't seen him in almost 2 years. He stood at the door alone, hands in his pockets, hair a little grayer, expression tired but not angry. Just human. "Can I see the house?" he asked quietly. I let him inside, not speaking. He walked slowly, like someone moving through a museum filled with memories he wasn't sure he wanted to touch. His fingers grazed the banister. He looked at the ballroom, the garden, the renovated studios. "It's different," he said. "Better." We reached the balcony overlooking the fountain. He rested his hands on the railing, staring at the property that once defined his family. "You really did it," he whispered. "You changed everything." I stood beside him, calm and grounded. "This place needed to change," I said. He nodded. "I'm not here for forgiveness," he added. "I don't expect that. I just wanted to see what you became after everything." I studied him for a moment. He looked smaller than I remembered, not in height but in pride. "You know," he said softly, "I used to think my mother was protecting me. But really, she was protecting herself. And I let her." I didn't respond. He wasn't wrong, but it wasn't my job to fix his truth. Then he looked at me with a sad smile. "You made it beautiful, Maya." This time, his voice held no jealousy, no anger, no bitterness. Just awe. My answer came easily. "It always was," I said. "You just never looked close enough." We stood in silence before he turned to leave. As he walked away, I felt no grief, no longing, just closure, quiet and complete. Building the retreat changed me, but I realized something more was needed. Too many women walk through those doors carrying stories like mine, stories of being dismissed, belittled, trapped, or silenced. Stories that needed more than classes and encouragement. They needed safety. They needed resources. They needed doors open that the world kept locked. So I created a fund. A real one. One that offered emergency housing, education grants, therapy, business classes, and legal support for women escaping toxic families or relationships. I named it the Loron Foundation for New Beginnings. Within months, donations poured in. Former clients, anonymous donors, survivors who wanted to pay their healing forward. Even one unexpected donation from a private name I never confirmed, but suspected might have been Evelyn. The foundation partnered with shelters, schools, law firms, and small businesses. We found women jobs, housing mentors. We helped some enroll in college. One young woman started her own bakery. Another opened a floral shop. Another became a carpenter, something her family said she was too delicate to do. And each time someone stood in our renovated ballroom sharing their journey, I felt something warm expand inside me. A truth, a legacy, a place built out of ashes that now sheltered others from fires of their own. The mansion no longer felt like the enemy's fortress. It felt like a lighthouse, bright, steady, guiding people home. And every time I walked through the halls, past the women learning new skills, past the laughter echoing through once silent rooms, I thought, this is how belonging is built. Not through blood, through choice. I sat on the mansion's front steps one quiet evening, the sun settling low, the air warm with promise. Laughter drifted from inside. Students finishing a workshop, volunteers cleaning up, Liam calling my name from somewhere down the hall. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the peace sink in. Real peace. Hard-earned, long-fought, deeply rooted. This house, these walls, had once been a symbol of exclusion, a gate slammed in my face, a reminder that I wasn't enough for someone else's fragile pride. But now it was filled with women learning to rise, with stories healing, with futures being built. I opened my eyes and looked at the mansion, the soft lights in the windows, the ivy climbing the bricks, the sign that read New Beginnings Retreat and Design Center. And a quiet voice inside me whispered the truth I had waited years to say. They said I'd never belong in their mansion. I let the words settle in the warm air. Then the second truth surfaced, clear as a bell. So I didn't. I stood, brushing dust from my hands, and felt a calm smile spread across my face. I built my own place here. I turned toward the open door, where light spilled like gold and laughter welcomed me in. And now, it belongs to everyone who was ever told they couldn't. I stepped inside, into the warmth, into the future, into the life I had created, and closed the door gently behind me. The story was complete. The house was mine. And more importantly, so was I. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments.